Welcome to this webinar, everyone, and thank you for joining us on World Menopause Day. Let me introduce myself. My name is Rob Small. I'm the National Disability Training and Consultancy Manager at Maximus's Health Division. I'm a qualified L&D professional and have over 15 years experience in the delivery of consultancy and training-based services to both internal and external clients. For those of you that aren't familiar with Maximus, we employ 5,000 highly trained colleagues to deliver services across 285 sites. And we specialize in assessments, health, employability, and connect services to a range of government and private sector clients. So we're very excited to be able to have you join us as part of World Menopause Day. And today's webinar will explore how a proactive approach to supporting those who may be experiencing symptoms of menopause can benefit your organization and its employees. I'll introduce you to the business case for supporting menopause effectively in your organization, as well as highlighting the prevalence and importance of supporting those who may be experiencing symptoms within your workplaces. I'll then hand over to Dr. Rachel Levine. Rachel is a general practitioner with over 35 years of experience in the field of medicine and GP services. For the last 8 years, Rachel has been working in the private sector, providing primary care to families and businesses in the corporate arena. Rachel's going to explore the topic of menopause with you further, specifically why it has such an impact on women and the workplace as a whole. And then we'll move on to Kath Wood, who is the product and consultancy lead within our department. Kath is instrumental in the delivery and development of new and bespoke service solutions and draws on over 25 years experience in working on the field of disability. Kath will take you through several key preventative steps and proactive measures you as an organization can take to support those experiencing symptoms of menopause in the workplace. As Togshen mentioned earlier, we've got a chance to respond to your questions at the end of today's webinar, so please feel free to submit these to us throughout the webinar using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. So we're now going to explore the prevalence of menopause within your workplaces, and here are some quite shocking and sobering statistics. We already know that there are 4.4 million women who are aged between 50 and 64 that are employed within the UK. Currently, 67% of these women in this age group are in work, up from 53% in 2000. There is a myth in existence that menopause automatically starts at the age of 50. Wouldn't it be nice if everything in life was that predictable? Unfortunately, just like the onset of menstruation, labor, and childbirth, menopause doesn't make an appointment with someone. On average, menopause begins around the age of 52, but some could begin experiencing symptoms as early as their late 30s to as late as their early 60s. So it's important to be aware that every woman is different. Taking that information into account, around 8 in 10 women will experience noticeable symptoms of menopause. And of these 8, 45% of women will find their symptoms more challenging to deal with. So most women are going to have symptoms and nearly half will significantly struggle with these symptoms. And from data obtained via the menopause survey that was conducted in 2018, 76% of respondents to this survey said that they had found their symptoms of menopause to be moderately or extremely problematic in the workplace. 19% of respondents reported needing time out of work and were absent for more than 8 weeks, with 44% of these respondents stating that they had to take time out of work due to their symptoms, but had not disclosed the real reason for their absence. We also know, via the Menopause at Work report published in 2022 by the Foresight Society, that 8% of women had not applied for a promotion due to their symptoms, 14% had needed to reduce their working hours, and sadly 10% of women have left work. To have 10% of an experienced and talented women leave their jobs is a significant impact on any business. And it's not going to be easy to replace those women within your organizations. Oxford Economics estimates that replacing a member of staff costs around £30,000, including both the cost of lost output while a replacement employee gets up to speed and the logistical cost of recruiting and absorbing a new worker. So, what this tells us is that menopause as a topic is still very much a taboo subject when it comes to being openly discussed and supported within your workplaces. This also shows that if symptoms of menopause are not supported correctly and effectively within your organization, this can lead to a significant level of cost to your business. Not only will a lack of support demotivate your workforce and bring unnecessary costs as a result, it could also create tricky legal repercussions. Currently, employees can bring complaints of age, sex, or disability discrimination because of how they've been treated in relation to menopause. In October 2021, an employment tribunal decision confirmed that severe menopause symptoms qualify as a disability. This means that employers are under a positive duty to make reasonable adjustments for employees with severe menopausal symptoms. So now I'm going to hand over to Rachel to explore the topic of menopause in more detail and a broader look at why it's had such an impact on women within the workplace. So welcome, Rachel, and over to you.
Thank you very much for that overview, Rob. So what is the menopause? Well, strictly speaking, it can really only be identified or diagnosed retrospectively, as it marks the point in time of the last period, in the way that menarche marks the point at which the first period appears. It typically occurs between the age of 45 and 55, with an average age of about 51 in the UK. There is some interesting variation worldwide of the average age of the menopause. For example, in India, it's 44.6 years, while in France, it's 52. The perimenopause refers to the lead up to the menopause, and this is really the period of time that people refer to, by and large, when they talk about the menopause, and that's when the symptoms begin to kick off. Postmenopause refers to the time after that last period, when menopausal symptoms may well be continuing, and of course they can continue for many years after this, sometimes 10 years or more. Early menopause is defined as menopause occurring before the age of 45, and premature menopause is defined as menopause occurring before the age of 40, which rather surprisingly affects about 1% of women, can obviously be extremely distressing and carries with it implications for obviously fertility, but also the prospect of increased risk of osteoporosis, psychosexual dysfunction, neurological conditions, heart disease, mood disorders, and statistically premature death. So why does the menopause have such a wide-reaching effect on people? Well, it's because there are estrogen receptors, estrogen being the women's hormone, as testosterone is the male hormone. And just to mention that men have estrogen, but in proportionately much less smaller amount, and women have some testosterone, again, with less than men. So the estrogen receptors exist on a vast array of cells, and the low estrogen levels at the menopause result in quite a wide range of symptoms as a result. So estrogen is produced by the ovaries, and as women get older, the ovaries start to produce less and eventually stop functioning altogether. And it's because the estrogen receptors are on such a wide range of the body's organs that this drop in estrogen causes such problems. Every woman's experience is different. In fact, only this morning I was talking to a lady who was about 60 who had had no symptoms at all. And I thought she was very lucky. Some women have very little in the way of symptoms, while others can be extremely disabled by them for years and years. Again, there's an interesting ethnic variation. For example, studies in the United States have shown that non-Hispanic white women average about 6.5 years of symptoms, while Japanese women are the least troubled at 4.5 years. Difficult to know the reason for this. It may be dietary in origin, there may be social factors, but also, of course, genetics. One symptom may be enough to scupper the individual's ability to do their work or trigger a whole range of negative outcomes. And I think there were really stark examples of this during the pandemic, when all medical and clinical staff were completely encased in PPE, and female employees of a certain age really struggled to cope while wrapped up in plastic aprons and really suffocating masks. Male colleagues obviously struggled enough, but if you add in hot flushes, overwhelming sweats during an incredibly hot summer, I think you've got a pretty unbearable and potentially quite unsafe situation. So let's have a look at the overview of the symptoms. Drop in estrogen levels can happen gradually, and they usually do, or in the case of surgical removal of the ovaries, overnight, pretty much. And it's the drop in estrogen that causes the symptoms. Furthermore, it's the ratio of estrogen to testosterone, the male hormone, also changes, resulting in further distressing testosterone dominant symptoms such as hirsutism, that's the male pattern of hair distribution, as well as acne. So I've listed a lot of the commonest symptoms that women come with, and I think it's really important, when I say that one symptom may scupper everything. We hear time and again that women have gone to the GP and said, oh, I'm getting some hot flushes or the night sweats, and they've been dismissed of, well, sweat it out, haha, and this will pass. But that may have huge implications. So we group the symptoms into a variety of types. So the vasomotor symptoms are about instability of the tiny capillary blood vessels, which dilate, causing flushing and heat, and then constriction, resulting in cold sweat. And that also causes the night sweats. Palpitations are a problem, insomnia, which is often nothing to do with night sweats, a wide range of psychological symptoms, including anxiety, agitation, tearfulness, also poor concentration, poor memory, the so-called brain fog, depression, not surprisingly, and what we call anhedonia, which is a general sort of loss of enjoyment in usual activities. Aching joints and muscles is a symptom that's often overlooked and put down to arthritis. Vaginal dryness and discomfort is a very severe problem, often a longer term problem. Loss of libido, weight gain, which very few people are happy with, and hair and skin changes. So I'd just like to look at a couple of scenarios. And patients can feel really depressed because of any one of these symptoms, which can have a huge impact on their lives. So night sweats, very common problem. Obviously, it's going to cause sleep deprivation. This is going to cause daytime exhaustion and mood instability, anxiety, palpitations, poor memory. And, to myself, I was thinking, oh, this sounds like being a junior doctor back in the day, with ridiculous hours of work, but actually without any prospect of things getting better. So that's obviously going to have a huge impact on work. Another scenario, vaginal dryness. It seems like a very self-contained problem, but this is obviously going to be associated with loss of libido. It may have serious detrimental effects on personal relationships, and also cause depression. Again, weight gain resulting in poor body image, lack of confidence, which can lead to lack of concentration, lack of poor memory, further lack of confidence, which ultimately can lead to reduced performance at work. It's a vicious circle. I see a lot of this. These are not exaggerations. So just to remind us, 100% of women are going to go through the menopause. 63% on average say that the menopause impacts negatively on their work. 1 in 4 say they can't continue in their workplace because of their symptoms. And later on in this discussion, we'll look at the ways of managing this. But in the meantime, I'll hand over to Kath Wood for a more in-depth look at the impact of the menopause on the workplace.
Thanks, Rachel. So we've heard from Dr. Rachel about the potential symptoms that women could experience during the menopause transition and how significant and common those symptoms are. It's also clear from Rob's introduction that every business will have employees going through the menopause transition because there are a significant number of older women in the workforce. So now it's time to look at menopause in relation to work. We do need to consider that sometimes women may be experiencing symptoms for a long time before they even realise it could be the menopause. During the perimenopause, women could still be having periods, so may not associate their symptoms with the menopause. Then women will need to seek a diagnosis from a doctor, which isn't always straightforward. Research from leading menopause specialist Dr. Louise Newson found that 74% of women who took part in her study had experienced symptoms such as hot flushes for around 12 months before they were diagnosed as perimenopausal or menopausal by their doctor. Both these factors will delay the all-important first conversation at work between a woman and her line manager, but that's not the only thing that can cause a delay. Many women are reluctant to talk about their symptoms and the menopause in general at work or with their manager. So why are many women reluctant to disclose that they're experiencing menopausal symptoms? Some women believe it's private and personal and are embarrassed to talk about it with anyone, especially those at work. They may not know their line manager well enough to talk about something so sensitive, and if their line manager is male, this may also present another barrier. There may be a fear that they won't be taken seriously, or they could be concerned about confidentiality and that everybody in their team will find out about it if they disclose to their manager. Women may be worried about being perceived as less capable than before, and that this will have a negative effect on their career progression and promotion prospects, or even think that it will put their job at risk. They could be concerned about negative attitudes, inappropriate jokes, and even discrimination from managers and colleagues. If you take into account the symptoms of anxiety, low mood, lack of confidence that women may be experiencing, it's unsurprising that these worries exist, even if there are very positive relationships at work. So Dr. Rachel has explained a range of symptoms that women may experience, and now I'm going to take you through some elements of work that could exacerbate those symptoms. These symptoms may also have a knock-on adverse effect on a woman's performance at work. Poor ventilation and air quality will affect women experiencing breathing difficulties. High temperature and lack of ventilation will make hot flushes much more difficult for them to manage. Natural light is important as it can boost their mood. It's also important that women can access drinking water, and ideally chilled drinking water, as this can help with a number of their symptoms. It's vital that women have consistent and easy access to both toilet and washing facilities. Certain fabrics can exacerbate skin irritations and be uncomfortable during a hot flush, so there may need to be some adjustments to uniforms, dress code, and PPE. Long shifts can be difficult with a lot of symptoms, and especially if women are experiencing insomnia and fatigue. Inflexible break times will not be helpful, as women may need to take last-minute breaks to manage some of their symptoms and will need to access the bathroom much more frequently. Excessive workloads can be difficult if women are experiencing cognitive symptoms, and workplace stress can make any emotional and psychological symptoms worse. Travelling can be difficult, especially if this affects a woman's access to toilet and washing facilities, and staying away from home can also present additional problems. Now, if we think about the wider culture at work, there are some more things which can make it harder for women experiencing symptoms. These include negative attitudes in general about menopause or women's health, unsympathetic line management and unsupportive team, bullying and harassment, which could include inappropriate jokes and comments, limited work opportunities, such as being passed over for projects or a promotion, lack of suitable policies, processes and risk assessments within the business, and limited awareness and knowledge about the menopause. And particularly important is the lack of management training on women's health issues. Now let's start to consider what we can do to address the issues in the workplace. And we're going to consider a hierarchy of intervention. At the organisational level, a senior management and board commitment can be made. This can be done by releasing a clear statement from the chief executive and board, recognising that menopause is an important workplace issue. The business should develop policies or review existing policies. This includes creating a standalone menopause policy, but also making sure it's mentioned in other relevant policies, such as sickness absence, equality and diversity, health and safety, special leave or flexible working. And we would expect organisations to provide and publicise resources and services, including ensuring that your EAP and occupational health service can support menopause issues, and make resources and links to useful information widely available on the intranet and through communications. At a management level, it's vital that all line managers are aware of the potential impact of the menopause and have an understanding of what women in their teams could be experiencing. It's also about managers having training, so they now know how to offer practical support and put workplace adjustments in place. And again, managers need to know about resources and services so they can signpost colleagues to the right ones. Line managers are so important in this piece as they are the first point of contact for health concerns and work changes and adjustments. They're involved in implementing policies and practices and are responsible for managing absence, keeping in touch, and the return to work. At an individual level, we would hope that all colleagues in an organisation are made aware of the menopause, its symptoms, and its potential effects at work. This will increase their understanding should a colleague, partner, friend, or relative go through adverse symptoms. This can be done through awareness campaigns, posters, news articles, blogs, and case studies. Colleagues who have this awareness of the issue will also have a better understanding of any adjustments that need to be made in the workplace, and this can help to avoid negativity and conflict if somebody appears to be treated favourably. So we've already heard about elements of work which can exacerbate symptoms, so let's talk about what could be done to address these issues. There are 3 things that are really important to remember before we go any further. The failure to make reasonable adjustments could lead to claims under the Equality Act 2010. Whilst the menopause is not a specific protected characteristic, if an employee or worker is put at a disadvantage and treated less favourably because of their menopause symptoms, this could be discrimination if it relates to protected characteristics such as age, disability, gender reassignment, or sex. Workplace adjustments are designed to help somebody to work to their full potential and add full value to your business, so getting it right can boost productivity. And of course, if you don't make adjustments, you risk that talented, capable and experienced women are absent or eventually leave your business. Remember, it could cost you up to £30,000 to replace them. I'm now going to highlight a few key workplace adjustments which could be of benefit, but remember, every case is different. It's also important to note that many of these adjustments are just simple changes to the ways that we work and the working environment, but these could have a massive impact on women's symptoms and productivity. So if a woman is experiencing fatigue or extreme tiredness, disrupted sleep and insomnia, then flexible working, more frequent or longer breaks, or even a room for rest will help. If they have joint pain or osteoarthritis or muscle tension, then you could offer reduced travel, locate their workstation nearest the exits and staff facilities such as toilets and the lunchroom, or ensure they have the ability to move around if needed. And if a woman is having cognitive issues such as memory lapses, lack of focus, poor concentration and brain fog, then giving information both written and verbally can help. Also offering planning, prioritising and organising time and access to a quiet space or noise cancelling headphones. If women are experiencing physical sensations such as tingling extremities, skin issues, hot flushes, electric shocks or dizzy spells, you should provide fans, fresh air, access to cold drinks and seats if needed, and give an exemption from or adjustment to uniform, dress code or PPE. If they are having irregular periods, vaginal issues, digestive problems, bloating or bladder issues, then making sure they are located near a toilet is essential, as well as providing access to washing facilities and sanitary products. Working from home or reduced travel may also be of benefit. And if there are psychological issues such as mood swings, crying spells, anxiety, irritability, low mood, low confidence and low self-esteem, it can really help if their team are made aware. But this is absolutely up to the individual to decide if they want their colleagues to know. Another option will be to provide a workplace buddy. Managers should try to manage targets and deadlines sympathetically and signpost suitable services such as the Employee Assistance Programme. In our final section, Dr. Rachel and I will briefly cover some self-help tips and treatment options. So what can women do to manage their symptoms? One way is to learn about the menopause. The NHS website has some really straightforward information that's easy to access. And there are a number of different menopause charities and organisations that people can access to. The Balance app has been designed by menopause specialists to help women to become informed and better prepared for the perimenopause and menopause. It allows them to take control of their health and their body. The second way is to look after general health and well-being, and there's some simple tips which can help women to manage their symptoms. Healthy eating can alleviate some symptoms and help keep bones healthy. Eating regularly and drinking plenty of water, especially chilled water, can be very helpful. Wearing natural fibres, exercising regularly, because exercise can reduce hot flushes, improve sleep, boost mood, and maintain strong bones. Not smoking, cutting down caffeine, alcohol and spicy food, having access to natural light, and making sure you get adequate rest and relaxation. There are a number of different treatments that women can access, but the most important thing is to strongly encourage any woman who's experiencing symptoms like we've heard to seek the advice of their GP. It's important to rule out other causes for the symptoms, to get a diagnosis, and then to have the access to the right treatment. I'm now going to hand back to Dr. Rachel, who's going to tell you about the third way to manage symptoms, the medical support that's available. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you very much for that, Kath. So what can we as clinicians do to help, and what should you expect from your GP? Well, first and foremost, patients need time to discuss their concerns and voice their worries. And many women don't realise that they are perimenopausal until they've discussed their symptoms with a friend, a colleague, or a doctor. Just having the time and space to listen and sympathise, and depending on the doctor you see, empathise, is therapeutic in itself, and being able to reassure the patient or arrange further investigations as appropriate is really essential, especially in the case of premature menopause. We found that having a longer appointment at a set menopause clinic is really helpful and allows a more useful and thorough assessment and discussion. We need to take a detailed medical history as well as carefully assessing the menopausal symptoms. We check height, weight, blood pressure, and ensure that the woman is up to date with her cervical screening, mammograms if appropriate, and that they are breast aware and regularly examine themselves. It's all incredibly important basic self-care. It's also obviously an excellent opportunity to discuss diet, as we've heard, exercise and alcohol intake, as well as caffeine intake, which is also really important considering the amount of coffee that's consumed every day. And if you're someone who's susceptible to hot flushes, it's the last thing, or palpitations, it's probably the last thing you should be drinking. Simple measures such as cutting back on weekly alcohol intake and taking more exercise is proven to be beneficial, and really does help menopausal symptoms in a lot of women, to the extent that that's all that's needed to control their symptoms. A blood test, we're often asked about this. Blood tests may or may not be appropriate, and it's important to be mindful of other conditions that might mimic some of the symptoms of the menopause, such as a very high thyroid level, a condition called hyperthyroidism. And blood tests can be done very easily to diagnose that, as well as premature menopause. So any woman under the age of 45, but especially between 40 and 45, and certainly under 40, we would offer a test, a hormonal test to them. We also suggest that patients complete something called the Green Climacteric Scale, which can be found on the Menopause Matters website, which is a very good website. Just ignore all the advertising, but it is a very good website. The women can score their symptoms to ascertain whether they might benefit by HRT, in fact, or other more simple measures. And sometimes just to enable them to see that their symptoms are normal and not unusual. Patients often feel very relieved to realise that they're not alone in their experiences, and that basically we're there to help them through this very tricky time of their lives and support them in any way we can. I think, as in everything in life, knowledge is key, and there is a lot of very useful information out there in the form of websites, apps, books, podcasts, reading material, not to mention the abundance of celebrities making the menopause a more than acceptable subject for discussion. So in terms of managing the symptoms, apart from the lifestyle changes already mentioned, and Kath really detailed a lot of those, this may involve prescribing HRT, which stands for hormone replacement therapy, or other alternative approaches, including some over-the-counter remedies, which are plant-based, what are called phytoestrogens. So these are plant-based hormones which mimic human estrogen. And again, I would just add that that's not suitable for everyone. And some of these phytoestrogens are so convincing as estrogens that they can cause problems for women who you may not want their estrogen receptors to be stimulated. So, for example, women who've had certain breast cancers. Acupuncture has got a good reputation for hot flushes, and there does seem to be a lot of benefit in tweaking the diet, especially eating yams and sweet potatoes. I've had some patients who absolutely swear by this and think that, well, they have clearly done them the world of good, and so you may wish to try that as a simple measure first. And also various vegetable groups, various beans, soya-based things, tofu, etc. There's an enormous amount of information out there. HRT itself is certainly very likely to deal with the worst of the vasomotor symptoms, and that is the one thing it's really useful for. And of course, the knock-on effect may add to the improved sense of well-being generally. So it is not a magic pill or magic patch or magic gel. It really has a very strong place for a lot of women. It's also known to help bone strength, and although it's not primarily recommended for many of the other menopausal symptoms, it's clear from the feedback that we get that patients feel quite a wide-reaching benefit. So if the patient's symptoms or medical history requires a specialist input from a gynecologist, they should be referred. So this would include women, for example, with a family history of breast cancer, or a woman who's had a history of cancer herself. That's not to say there's absolutely no way they can have HRT, but it would require a specialist input. And I'd also just like to mention AFAB. This is assigned female at birth men or trans men who may also be suffering from symptoms. And I would recommend a referral to a specialist gender reassignment clinic for further and more sensitive management of this group of patients. One of the commonest concerns is without doubt the issue of discussing symptoms with managers. Obviously, there's a huge amount of embarrassment for many women about broaching the issue, especially if the manager is very young or male. And we do try to encourage our patients to discuss workplace adaptations, for example, sitting near an open window, layering up clothing and so on, as well as having a desk fan, being able to come in late from work. And this has been outlined really clearly previously. So discussing this with a trusted colleague and offering a buddy system, I think, is a really excellent idea. And certainly we get positive feedback about this sort of thing from our patients. We will also offer to write a letter in support of any requests as appropriate in terms of workplace adaptation. So these issues and the implications of the company's legal obligations have been really well covered by Kath. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a reminder, if you have a question to ask, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So we had a first question that came through, which is, I am given to understand that HRT is in high demand and have personally experienced delays in getting product. How is this being addressed? Is there anyone who would like to?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, HRT has had a bit of a roller coaster in terms of availability, and around COVID, and it was horrendous, and we were having to sort of quickly change women over from, a patch that they'd been happily on for years onto a tablet, which has quite a different absorption, and may cause problems in itself. It's much better than it was. I'm not hearing these stories so much anymore. I don't know why it's probably partly political. A lot of people blamed Brexit when this happened, that there was a block in the supplies from abroad. I don't know how genuine that is, but it does seem to go in waves, and I can only imagine that the production line is very complex, but it seems to be fine at the moment. And I think there was a lot of lobbying in government, in Parliament about this. So if you are somebody who's considering it, you should be okay. I'm prescribing all the things I normally prescribe at the moment, and I'm not having women coming back in a panic.
Thank you, Rachel. We had another related question on HRT. Do you have to pay for HRT?
Yes, you do. Now, the contraceptive pill, you don't have to pay for if it's through the NHS, if it's by the NHS, but HRT, unfortunately, you do. And I think the other thing that's very unfortunate is for most women, they have to take not just estrogen replacement, but you need to protect the lining of the womb. And so you have to take a progestogen, which is another type of female hormone. And you will be charged for the estrogen and the progestogen, which seems very unfair when they're essential together. And the other thing is there are some patches which are a combination of the two, and I think that you will be charged for two separate prescriptions, even though the pack is essentially the estrogen and progestogen. So the problem is if you're really stable on your HRT, but you can only get 3 months supply, you're going to be paying every 3 months for 2 NHS prescriptions, which is quite a lot. It'll be even more expensive on a private prescription, I think, but I'm afraid, yeah, you do.
Thank you, Rachel. The next question is, could you please repeat the things which could help with hot flushes?
As that was my section, I'm happy to take that one. So thank you for your question. So whether it be hot flushes or other skin issues, some people obviously have electric shocks as well. We talked about fans, so having access to a desk fan or a stand-up fan, access to fresh air, so either sitting by a window or being able to access fresh air on a regular basis. Cold drinks, so chilled drinks would be ideal. And obviously if people are having the dizzy spells as well, then people may need access to seats if they are normally standing at work. There are lots more, but those are the kind of main ones to consider. Obviously, if you are subject to PPE or a uniform or have a strict dress code, you could also look at getting exemptions or adjustments to that. Obviously, tight clothing, certain uniform materials can be particularly difficult if you're having a hot flush.
Thank you. Thanks, Kath. The next question is, if women find it hard to talk to their manager, is there a well-being advisor at work or an alternative person who could then suggest adjustments to managers on their behalf, like OCC health? Occupational health, I assume. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take a stab at that one. But it's probably a group conversation in all fairness, but ultimately it's something that we would advocate. We can't necessarily answer for your specific organisation if you have a wellbeing advisor or advocate or champion even, depending on what your organisation may well call them. But we would definitely advocate that is something that organisations do look into, not just for menopause in all fairness, but wellbeing as an overarching topic and theme. That often interlinks with something like mental health, can be a really great route in terms of, as you say, being able to openly discuss that with someone perhaps you do feel more comfortable to be able to engage with, whilst also then perhaps having that person support you either in that conversation or feeding that back if it's at your choice and your choosing. So definitely something we would recommend and something we do with other businesses and organisations, but couldn't answer exclusively for your organisation itself.
Just to chip in a little bit on that one, if there isn't anybody that naturally comes to mind within the workplace, it can be really helpful to join forums or Facebook groups and talk to other women who are experiencing symptoms as an interim solution whilst deciding to broach that subject with a line manager, and also to consider that as a route to having an option to talk things through and get your kind of ideas logically before you kind of broach that subject with a manager. Obviously, you could also go directly to your HR department or employee relations department if you feel that you want to talk to somebody else rather than your line manager. However, I would encourage you to talk to your line manager, as they are the best person to actually provide that practical day-to-day support and make those adjustments in the workplace. So I think I would encourage you to still pursue that route if and when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you both. The next question is, for how many years on average do symptoms tend to continue for postmenopause?
I'm happy to take that one. It's really, really variable. I mean, I have seen women who've had symptoms for 10 years or more, but and some women, as I said, I saw someone today who had really had almost no symptoms at all. I think on average, I think from my slide mentioned that there is quite an interesting ethnic variation here, and anything from a few years to 15 years I've seen. I remember some years ago having a patient who was in her 70s who was still taking HRT. There was a question related to how long can I take HRT. I really can't obviously comment on individual cases, but depending on the individual, they may need that treatment for many years, and provided person is low risk and they don't have any reasons for stopping it and they're aware of the risk benefits, then they can carry on. Is there an average person? I suppose 5-6 years. Most women are through the menopause, I suppose, by their early 60s, and in terms of starting HRT, just in case there's a question about this, we usually don't start it 10 years after the menopause has happened, and we usually don't start it beyond the age of 60. But again, nothing's written in stone, and everybody is, everyone is individual about that. And some symptoms things can seem to settle and then get worse again, because what happens is the estrogen levels kind of are cruising along and they drop. And then there are more symptoms, and then it cruises along and drops again. And that might happen, several years later. It's sort of the dying embers of the ovaries, which is slightly depressing thought. But that is why, the symptoms can just drag on.
Thank you. The next question is from Joanne. What can help with self-esteem, brain fog, poor concentration? Do I speak to my line manager as I'm working for an agency and about to be taken on permanent? My mind is shocking, and I'm concerned I won't be taken on because of this.
I'll take that one if that's okay. So
Okay.
There's a couple of options. Obviously, in an ideal world, we want you to feel comfortable and confident to have the conversation at work and get your line manager's support with any adjustments. But I totally understand the situation that you're in makes you feel a bit vulnerable about having that conversation. So I would say let's think about self-help route first. So things that you can do: alarms, alerts, checklists, planners, allowing yourself some planning and organising time at the start of your shift and at the end of your shift. This doesn't always have to be obvious to everybody else. It's just, things that you can implement to help your own memory and processing. Think about what tasks you need to prioritise at the time when you're feeling most alert. So there are certain times of the day where you might feel at your best. We'll pick the most complex tasks to do at that time. Think about noise cancelling headphones or taking some quiet space to do some of those more complex tasks, when you're concerned around the cognitive ability dropping off, using that quiet space to avoid the distractions, and things like a do not disturb, or putting your kind of out of office on for an hour or two, just to kind of allow you to catch up with all the stuff and kind of go through your lists that you've made could really be helpful. Obviously, in the longer term, it'd be great to have those conversations with your line manager, because there are things that they can do or they can accommodate within the workplace. But I think there's a lot of self-help you could do first, which actually might help you feel more secure in your current position.
Thank you, Kath. This was very helpful. We have the next question here is, there was certain foods which were mentioned which could help with hot flushes. If those could be repeated, please. I believe it was in your section, Rachel.
Yeah. Look, I can't promise these are going to work like a lucky charm, I have to say, but there are lists of these. But I have certainly had patients recommend yams and sweet potatoes. So I think a lot of soya-based foods, tofu, and the bean family seems to be in soybeans, for example, are found to be very beneficial in some women. I don't know if there's going to be if we're going to be able to sort of put some fact sheets out or something after this, but I can certainly give you a list. I mean, it is a long list. You can find a lot of information on those websites. The British Menopause Society has a patient section, so I would certainly look at that, and also Menopause Matters, and the Amaranth Trust. I think that might be a paying website, but it's that has lots of useful information as well. So try those for starters.
Thank you. We're going to share an email address at the end of the webinar where you could send your questions if you had any after the webinar is over. The next question is, could you point me in the direction of where I can get a template for a menopause policy for the workplace?
I'm happy to provide a limited answer to that one. There are lots of sources of sort of templates of menopause on the internet. So I can't give you specific sites that I would recommend, but if you drop that question in an email to the email address, I'll happily provide you with that information following the session.
Thank you, Kath. The next question is there information for partners and families? It seems to have an important role to play.
I mean, I would just recommend going on to the NHS website as a starting point. And a lot of the organisations have it that we've mentioned, the various websites have it in very plainly laid out information. They're not necessarily going into too much of the clinical side. So I would highly recommend that partners and families, managers, colleagues, whoever it may be, just equip themselves by having a look at some of those websites, starting maybe with the NHS one, because they will then the NHS website directs you out to other sources of information as well.
The only thing that I would add to that is ultimately part of today's session is around raising awareness and reducing the stigma on having conversations around this topic. So I think there is a lot of information available across the sites, as Kath and Rachel have mentioned, but the most important source, in my view, of information in terms of awareness comes from you directly in terms of the symptoms that you're experiencing and how it's affecting you as an individual. And being able to open up and communicate and articulate that in a more relaxed family environment can often help people with understanding in that space more so than perhaps feeling that it's a taboo subject that you couldn't raise.
Yeah, I think talking about it is really important, and being upfront. You know, I've long given up sort of pretending to remember stuff I'm told, and I just say, I'm not going to remember that. You have to write that down. We told you yesterday. Yeah, you told me yesterday. Write it down.
Just to make everyone aware, we are going to end this webinar at past, and we may not have the time to go through all the questions. So if we don't, we'll share an email address at the end to send your questions to. We have another question here. So, do any menopause vitamin help? Menopause, menobalance. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to read this correctly. Strapoa, etc.
Okay, I think you're talking about Menopause, the Vitabiotic ones. There's starflower oil, evening primrose oil. The active ingredient in the flower oils is gammalinic acid, and that's often found. So the gammalinic acid is sometimes found in those combination menopause treatments. There are a lot of, as I say, plant-based treatments. Again, they don't necessarily work like a charm. And also, just because it's herbal doesn't mean it's not an active ingredient. I mean, most of the drugs we use were once upon a time a plant. So, you know, be mindful of that. You know, all these over-the-counter remedies may not be suitable for everyone. The ones that have a good press for the menopause are black cohosh is one, and red clover is another one. There's lots of information on this on these websites that we've mentioned. Starflower oil and evening primrose oil, I think, are very good. I think these are very good actually for breast pain. Some women start getting breast pain and discomfort for the first time during the menopause, of course, having excluded anything serious going on, but it is very useful to take that as a supplement, and also maybe for mood swings to a degree. So those certainly, I think they are certainly worth trying. I really do. And please go for a reputable brand. I you know, not that I have any brand loyalty, but you know, that some are more reliable and more reliably manufactured than others. So I would talk to, say, the pharmacist, who will be a great source of information for you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for all your expert advice. Unfortunately, at this point, we'll have to wrap up the questions. Thank you all the panelists for your time today and for your great presentations. And thank you for all the attendees for attending today. We hope this session was helpful. As mentioned earlier, we will share a recording of this webinar when it becomes available. But if you have any questions at this point, please email us at workplacehealth@maximusuk.co.uk. Thank you very much.